Waking up pregnant with a dead woman's baby is one thing. Discovering that dead woman was your identical twin, a sister you never knew existed, is something else entirely. When interior designer Alara Quinn opens her eyes in a fortress mansion owned by Roman Vale, the most feared crime lord in New York, she realizes the surrogacy agreement she signed has trapped her in a nightmare far darker than anything she imagined. The child inside her is the last piece of a shattered family, and Roman will do anything to protect it, even if that means keeping Alara locked away from the world she knows. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The headache came first. Alara Quinn felt it boring into her skull before she even opened her eyes, a dull, persistent throb that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Her mouth tasted like metal and old pennies. Her limbs felt heavy, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else entirely. When she finally managed to pry her eyelids open, the light was wrong. Not the flat, grayish glare of her Brooklyn studio apartment where the neighbor's fire escape blocked most of the morning sun. This light was golden, slanting through floor-to-ceiling windows draped in fabric that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The ceiling above her stretched impossibly high, decorated with crown molding so intricate it looked hand-carved. Alara's breath caught. She wasn't home. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her stomach lurched, and a wave of nausea rolled through her body with enough force to make her collapse back against pillows that felt like clouds. Expensive clouds. The kind of pillows people put in magazines. Easy. The voice came from somewhere to her left, low, male, and completely unfamiliar. Alara's head whipped toward the sound despite the pain it caused. A man stood near the window, backlit by that golden light. Tall, broad-shouldered. His silhouette reminded her of the marble statues she'd studied in art history classes back when she thought she'd end up doing something more creative than staging overpriced condos for real estate agents who barely remembered her name. "Who the hell are you?" Her voice came out rough, scraped raw. The man moved closer, stepping into clearer light, and Alara's chest tightened. He was striking in a way that made her uncomfortable. Not handsome in the safe catalog model sense, but compelling. Sharp cheekbones. A jaw that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Dark hair pushed back from his forehead. Eyes so pale they were almost colorless, gray or maybe silver, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "My name is Roman Vale," he said. "You're in my home." "I don't—" Alara tried to sit up again, moving more slowly this time. Her hands went instinctively to her stomach, and that's when she felt it. The slight swell, the subtle fullness that hadn't been there before. Her blood turned to ice. "What did you do to me?" The words came out as a whisper, then louder, sharper. "What the fuck did you do?" Roman Vale didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped loosely in front of him like he was attending a business meeting, rather than watching a woman wake up in his house with no memory of how she got there. "You signed a contract," he said calmly. 3 months ago. A surrogacy agreement facilitated through a private medical clinic. The words hit her like physical blows. Surrogacy. Contract. 3 months. Alara's mind spun backward, grasping for memories through the fog. She remembered the clinic. God, yes, she remembered. A pristine building in Manhattan with floors so polished you could see your reflection. She'd been broke, desperate after her design business collapsed, and her landlord started leaving eviction notices on her door. The compensation they'd offered was obscene. Enough to start over. Enough to stop drowning. She'd signed papers, so many papers, but she'd never gone through with the procedure. She'd backed out at the last minute, hadn't she? Walked out of that clinic and caught the subway back to Brooklyn, telling herself she'd find another way to survive. Except now there was a life growing inside her. "No," Alara said, shaking her head hard enough to make the room tilt. "No, I didn't. I left. I changed my mind." "You were sedated," Roman said, and there was something in his voice now. Not quite regret, but something heavier than simple explanation. "The procedure was completed while you were unconscious." The air left Alara's lungs in a rush. "That's illegal," she managed. Jesus Christ, that's assault. That's why you're here instead of wherever you'd be if you'd woken up alone." Roman moved closer, and Alara instinctively pressed herself back against the headboard. He stopped at the foot of the bed, those pale eyes locked on hers. The people who did this to you are dead. The clinic has been shut down, and you are carrying a child that is worth more than you can possibly understand. Alara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the silk duvet, trying to ground herself in something real. Whose baby is this? Roman Vale's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, something cold and sharp. My wife's, he said, and mine. Then where is she? Alara demanded. Where's your wife? Why am I here instead of... She's dead. The words fell like stones into still water. Alara stared at him, trying to process the flatness in his voice, the complete absence of emotion. She died 4 months ago, Roman continued, before she could carry the child herself. The embryo was already created. The surrogacy was arranged, and then the people we trusted to protect this process decided to take shortcuts. By drugging me? Alara's voice cracked. By implanting an embryo in my body without my consent? Yes. No apology, no justification, just that single, stark confirmation. Alara wanted to scream, she wanted to run, but her body felt alien and heavy, and she had no idea where she was or how to get out. You can't keep me here, she said instead, forcing steel into her voice. I don't care who you are or what kind of security you think you have. You can't. I can, and I will. Roman's tone didn't rise, but the authority in it was absolute. Because the moment you step outside these walls, you become a target. The child you're carrying is the heir to everything I've built. And there are people who would kill you both without hesitation to prevent that inheritance. Alara's laugh came out bitter and slightly hysterical. Heir! You're talking about this like it's a throne. Like this is, what, some kind of Mafia movie? Roman Vale's expression finally changed. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Close enough, he said. The next few hours passed in a blur of information that Alara's brain kept trying to reject. A doctor came, an older woman with steady hands and kind eyes that didn't quite match the ruthless efficiency with which she examined Alara. Blood pressure, ultrasound. Questions about symptoms and comfort levels delivered in the same calm, clinical tone someone might use to discuss the weather. Alara answered mechanically, her mind spinning in circles. Pregnant. 3 months. No consent. The words kept bouncing around her skull, refusing to settle into anything resembling acceptance. When the doctor finally left, a woman who introduced herself as Irina arrived with food. She was middle-aged and stocky, with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun, and an expression that suggested she'd seen too much to be impressed by much of anything anymore. Eat, Irina said, setting down a tray laden with soup, bread, fruit, and what looked like fresh squeezed juice. Baby needs food. You need food. I need to leave, Alara countered. I gave her a look that was almost pitying. You're not prisoner, she said in accented English. You're protected. Is different. Is it? Yes. Irina moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Vale lost wife, lost unborn child, lost future, now has chance at piece of that back. You think he lets that go? You think he lets you go? She left before Alara could respond. The food sat untouched on the tray while Alara stared out the window at manicured grounds that stretched farther than she could see. High walls topped with what she suspected was very sophisticated security. Gardens that probably required a full-time staff. Somewhere in the distance, a fountain. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. And she was trapped inside it. Matsen. Roman Vale didn't return until evening. Alara had spent the afternoon exploring the bedroom, because it was a bedroom, not a cell, even if the distinction felt purely semantic at this point. Attached bathroom done in marble and gold fixtures. Walk-in closet already stocked with clothes in her size, which was somehow more disturbing than if it had been empty. Windows that didn't open, she discovered after 20 minutes of trying. She was standing at the glass, forehead pressed against the cool surface, when she heard the door open behind her. You should eat. Roman's voice. Alara didn't turn around. You should go to hell. Probably. He moved closer and she caught his reflection in the window glass. Still wearing the same dark suit, though he'd loosened his tie. He looked tired, she realized, lines around his eyes that hadn't been as visible in the morning light. But that doesn't change your situation. My situation. Alara finally turned to face him. You mean being kidnapped and held hostage by a criminal who thinks he can just... I prefer entrepreneur, Roman interrupted mildly. I prefer to call things what they are. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Almost. You have spirit. My wife would have liked that. The mention of his dead wife, the woman whose baby Alara was apparently carrying, sent a fresh wave of surreal horror through her system. Don't, Alara said sharply. Don't talk about her like we would have been friends. Don't act like this is anything other than what it is. And what is it? Insane, illegal, wrong on every possible level. Roman moved to the tray of food, picked up the untouched soup, and brought it to her. Alara stared at him. I'm not going to eat just because you... The child needs nutrients. His voice was quiet but implacable. Whatever anger you have toward me, don't take it out on an innocent life. Alara wanted to throw the bowl in his face. She wanted to scream that none of this was her responsibility, that she never agreed to any of it. Instead, she found herself taking the bowl, hating herself for it, but taking it anyway. She sat on the edge of the bed and forced herself to swallow the soup while Roman watched from near the window. It was good, rich and flavorful in a way that made her realize she was actually hungry. She finished half the bowl before her stomach couldn't handle any more. Who was she? Alara asked finally. Your wife. Roman was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, her name was Isabel. She was brilliant, fierce. She had a gift for seeing through lies, which made her dangerous to the right people. He paused. Wrong people, I suppose, depending on your perspective. How did she die? Car accident. The words came out flat. Except it wasn't an accident. It was an execution designed to look like one. Alara's fingers tightened on the soup bowl. And you want to bring a child into this? Into whatever world you live in, where people get murdered and made to look like accidents? I want my son to live. Roman's eyes met hers, and there was something burning in those pale depths, something that looked almost like pain. I want him to know his heritage, to grow up strong and protected and aware of exactly what threats exist in this world. My wife is gone, but part of her is still here. His gaze dropped to Alara's stomach. I won't lose that too. The intensity in his voice made Alara's skin prickle. You keep saying him, she said. How do you even know it's a boy? We had genetic testing done on the embryo before it was implanted. A son. Roman's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Isabel wanted a son first. She had names picked out, a whole future planned. Something twisted in Alara's chest, something that felt dangerously close to sympathy, which she absolutely could not afford to feel for this man. I'm sorry she's dead, Alara said carefully. I'm sorry you lost her, but that doesn't give you the right to imprison me, to force me into this. You're right. Roman's agreement caught her off guard. It doesn't, but whether I have the right or not is irrelevant at this point. You're here. You're carrying my child, and I will do whatever is necessary to protect you both. Even if I don't want your protection? Especially then. Alara set the soup bowl aside and stood, facing him fully. You can't keep me locked up for 9 months. You can't. I can, and I will. Roman moved closer, and despite every instinct screaming at her to back away, Alara held her ground. But I'd prefer not to make this a war between us. You're intelligent. You're resourceful. Given time, you'll see that cooperation serves you better than constant resistance. Cooperation? Alara's laugh was harsh. You mean submission? I mean survival. He stopped close enough that she could see the faint scar on his left temple, the way his jaw tightened when he spoke. The people who killed my wife are still out there. They know about the surrogacy. They know about you. If they find you, they will eliminate the threat you represent without a second thought. Then maybe you should let me go somewhere safe, somewhere far away from you and your criminal empire. There is nowhere safe. Roman's voice dropped lower. Not anymore. The moment that embryo was implanted, you became part of this whether you wanted to be or not. The only question now is whether you survive it. Alara wanted to argue, to insist that he was exaggerating, that there had to be another way, but something in his eyes told her he wasn't lying.
How long? She asked quietly. How long what? How long until I can leave? Roman was silent for a moment.
After the baby is born, he said finally, when the immediate danger has passed and appropriate security measures are in place. You'll be compensated generously for your time and cooperation. Enough to start whatever life you want, wherever you want to start it. And the baby? Stays with me. Of course. Alara didn't know why she'd even asked. So I'm just an incubator, she said bitterly. A walking womb you need to keep alive for 9 months. Something flickered across Roman's face. Anger, maybe. Or something else she couldn't quite identify. You're the woman carrying my son, he said quietly. That makes you invaluable. But it doesn't make you disposable. Before Alara could respond, he turned and walked to the door. Irina will bring you dinner in a few hours. If you need anything, there's a call button by the bed.
What if what I need is freedom? Roman paused in the doorway, his back to her. Then you'll have to settle for safety instead.
He left, and the lock engaged with a soft click that sounded like a prison door slamming shut. Alara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the impossible situation she'd found herself in. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Roman Vale's face, those pale, unreadable eyes, the absolute certainty in his voice when he talked about keeping her here. She'd been poor before, desperate even, but she'd always had her freedom. Now she had luxury and safety and a child growing inside her that wasn't supposed to be there. The cruelty of it made her want to scream. Around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep entirely and went to the window. The grounds were lit by subtle landscape lighting that made everything look like a stage set, beautiful and artificial and completely removed from reality. She pressed her hand against her stomach, still barely rounded, but undeniably present. This isn't your fault, she whispered to the life inside her. Whatever happens, this isn't your fault. The baby, because that's what it was now, whether she'd chosen it or not, didn't respond. But Alara felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders anyway. She'd spent her entire life trying to build something that mattered. A career. A reputation. A future that belonged to her alone. Now her body belonged to someone else's vision of what should be. The unfairness of it burned in her throat like acid. Morning came with Irina and another tray of food. Eat, the older woman said, setting it down with the same no-nonsense efficiency as before. Doctor says you must gain weight. Baby is small. The baby is 3 months old, Alara said. Of course it's small. Irina gave her a look that suggested she didn't appreciate sass with her morning deliveries. Mr. Vale says you can walk grounds today. Fresh air is good. Alara sat up straighter. I can go outside? With escort, security. Irina moved to the closet and started pulling out clothes. It's dangerous for you to be alone, but fresh air is important. It wasn't freedom, but it was something. Alara found herself showering and dressing with more care than she had in months. The clothes fit perfectly, designer labels she recognized from magazine spreads. Everything soft and expensive and carefully chosen for a pregnant woman's comfort. The attention to detail was almost worse than if they'd just thrown random clothes at her. When she emerged from the bathroom, a man was waiting in the bedroom. Young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and watchful eyes. He nodded politely. Miss Quinn, I'm Marcus. I'll be accompanying you this morning. You mean guarding me? His expression didn't change. Escorting. Mr. Vale's orders. Of course they are. The grounds were even more impressive up close. Manicured lawns. Flowering gardens that probably required an army of gardeners. The fountain she'd glimpsed from the window turned out to be a massive marble installation featuring some kind of mythological scene she couldn't quite identify. Everything was beautiful. Everything felt like a cage. Marcus kept a respectful distance, but never let her get more than a few feet ahead. Alara tested the boundaries, walking faster, changing direction suddenly. He matched her every move without apparent effort. How long have you worked for Roman Vale? She asked finally. 5 years. And what exactly do you do? Security. That's vague. Marcus almost smiled. It's meant to be. They walked in silence for a while. Alara tried to memorize the layout, exits, weak points, anywhere that might offer an opportunity to escape. But the walls were high, the security cameras were everywhere,
and she suspected there were things she wasn't seeing. Sensors, guards, measures designed to be invisible until someone tried to breach them. "Is it true?" she asked abruptly. "What he said about people wanting to kill me?" Marcus hesitated, and in that hesitation, Alara found her answer. "There are people who would see Mr. Vale's line ended," he said carefully. "The child you carry represents continuity, legacy. Some would view that as threat enough to act. So I'm bait." "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "You're protected. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." They'd circled back toward the house. Alara could see the massive structure rising against the morning sky, all stone and glass and architectural ambition, a mansion built to impress and intimidate in equal measure. Roman Vale was standing on one of the terraces, phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, Alara could read the tension in his shoulders, the sharp gestures as he spoke. Whatever conversation he was having, it wasn't pleasant. Marcus noticed her looking. "He carries a lot," he said quietly. "More than most people see. I'm sure running a criminal empire is very stressful. He protects people." There was an edge to Marcus's voice now. Hundreds of families depend on the stability he maintains, the order he enforces. "You see a crime lord. I see a man who holds together something that would tear itself apart without him." Alara turned to study the younger man's face. "You believe in him." "I'm alive because of him." Marcus met her eyes. "So are a lot of other people. Whatever you think you know about Mr. Vale, you're only seeing part of the picture." Before Alara could respond, Roman appeared at the terrace railing. He said something into his phone, then ended the call and descended the stone steps toward them. "Miss Quinn." His greeting was formal. "I trust the grounds are adequate?" "They're a very pretty prison," Alara replied. Roman's expression didn't change, but she saw Marcus tense slightly beside her. "I need to speak with you," Roman said. "Something's come up." "How ominous." "Marcus, give us a moment." The younger man nodded and retreated back toward the house, leaving Alara alone with Roman in the middle of the garden. Around them, flowers bloomed in colors too perfect to seem entirely natural. "What is it?" Alara asked when the silence stretched too long. Roman's pale eyes fixed on hers. "There's something I didn't tell you yesterday. About my wife. About Isabel." "What kind of something?" He seemed to be choosing his words carefully, which was somehow more disturbing than if he'd just blurted it out. "The genetic testing we had done before the embryo was implanted, it revealed something unexpected, a marker that appeared in both the maternal and paternal DNA." He paused. "Specifically, a marker that suggested Isabel had a sibling, a twin." Alara's world tilted. "That's impossible. You said she was an only child, yes. That's what we believed." Roman took a step closer. "But the genetic evidence was irrefutable. Somewhere she had a twin sister, separated at birth most likely." The implication hit Alara like a physical blow. "No," she said. "No, you can't be suggesting—" "When the clinic sent me your information after the procedure was completed without your consent, I had my people look into your background, your genetics." Roman's voice was steady, but there was something almost gentle in it now. "Alara, you're not just a random surrogate. You're Isabel's biological twin sister." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. "That's insane," Alara whispered. "I would know. My mother would have told me. There's no way. You were adopted. Through a private agency that closed down 20 years ago. The records were sealed. How do you— I have resources. And once I suspected the connection, I had the genetic testing redone. Multiple times through different labs." Roman's gaze held hers. "You and Isabel are identical twins. You share the same biological parents. You were separated within days of birth and placed with different families." Alara's knees felt weak. She sat down hard on a nearby bench, her mind refusing to process what he was telling her. A twin sister. A sister she never knew existed. A sister who was dead. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would someone separate twins?" "I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm looking." Roman sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "What I do know is that the child you're carrying is connected to both of us now. Genetically, you're his aunt. But you're also the woman bringing him into this world. Alara pressed her hands to her face, trying to breathe through the panic rising in her chest. This is too much. I can't. I know. And there was something in Roman's voice now that she hadn't heard before, something that almost sounded like understanding. But it's the truth, and you deserve to know it. She looked at him through her fingers, this man who'd turned her entire life inside out in the space of 24 hours. Did you know? She asked. When you found out I was the surrogate they'd used, did you know who I was? Not immediately, but once I saw your face, he trailed off. You look exactly like her. It's why I was certain even before the tests came back. Alara thought about the reflection she'd seen in the bathroom mirror this morning, the face she'd lived with her entire life. Apparently someone else had lived with the same face, someone who was dead now. I want to know about her, Alara said quietly. If she was my sister, if I had a twin I never got to meet, I want to know who she was. Roman was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll tell you, he said finally. Everything. And for the first time since Alara had woken up in this strange, beautiful prison, something inside her shifted. She was still trapped, still pregnant with a child she hadn't chosen to carry, still at the mercy of a man who lived by rules she didn't understand. But now there was a connection. A thread leading back to someone who shared her blood, her face, her very DNA. A sister she'd never known, but who had somehow brought her to this impossible moment. Alara looked down at her hands, at the slight swell of her stomach beneath the expensive clothes someone else had chosen for her. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. The question was whether she was strong enough to survive the transformation. Roman kept his promise that same afternoon. He led Alara to a room she hadn't seen before. A study lined floor to ceiling with books that actually looked red rather than decorative. Leather armchairs flanked a fireplace that probably cost more than Alara's entire former apartment building. On the mantel sat a collection of photographs in silver frames. Alara's breath caught when she saw them. The woman in the photos had her face, her eyes, her mouth. Even the way she smiled, slightly crooked, like she was in on a joke no one else understood, was identical to the expression Alara saw in her own mirror every morning. That's impossible, Alara whispered, moving closer. Her fingers hovered over one of the frames but didn't quite touch. We can't look that much alike. Identical twins often do. Roman stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the same photograph. It showed the woman, Isabel, laughing at something off camera, her hair caught mid-movement by the wind. She wore jeans and a sweater, nothing fancy, but she looked vibrant, alive. That was taken in Vermont. She loved the mountains, said they made her feel small in a good way. Alara forced herself to look at the other photos. Isabel at a formal event in an evening gown, Roman's hand at her waist. Isabel curled up with a book, glasses perched on her nose. Isabel in what looked like a professional setting, gesturing emphatically at someone outside the frame. Each image felt like looking at a version of herself she'd never been. Polished, confident, loved. Tell me about her, Alara said, finally tearing her gaze away from the photographs. Not just facts. Tell me who she was. Roman moved to one of the armchairs and gestured for Alara to take the other. She sat, suddenly exhausted despite having done nothing all day but walk the grounds and try not to have a breakdown. She was stubborn, Roman began, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth. Infuriatingly stubborn. Once she made up her mind about something, you could present her with every logical argument in the world and she'd still do exactly what she wanted. Sounds difficult. She was. But she was also brilliant at reading people. She could walk into a room and within 10 minutes tell you who was lying, who was afraid, who was dangerous. He leaned back, his pale eyes distant. That's how we met. She was working as a consultant for a law firm I had business with. I tried to manipulate the negotiation, and she called me out in front of everyone. Despite everything, Alara felt a flicker of interest. What did you do? I was furious. No one spoke to me that way. Roman's smile widened slightly. So naturally, I asked her to dinner. Naturally. She said no, told me I was exactly the kind of man her mother warned her about. He paused. Then she showed up at my office 2 days later and told me she'd reconsidered. Said she was curious whether I was actually as dangerous as I pretended to be. Ilara found herself leaning forward despite her better judgment. And was he? Were you? Roman's expression shifted, something darker sliding across his features. More than she realized at first. But by the time she understood the full scope of what I did, she was already in too deep. His jaw tightened. I gave her multiple opportunities to leave, to walk away before it became complicated. She refused every single one. Why? She said everyone deserved a chance at redemption, even people like me. Roman's voice had gone quiet. She believed that if I wanted to build something legitimate, something that could help people instead of just extracting from them, she could guide me toward it. She thought love could change someone's fundamental nature. Could it? Roman was silent for a long moment. I was trying to find out when she died. The rawness in his voice made Ilara's chest ache. She pushed the feeling away, reminding herself that this man had still kidnapped her, still held her prisoner, regardless of what grief he carried. You said she was murdered, made to look like an accident. A car crash on a mountain road. Brake lines cut, steering compromised. By the time I got there, he stopped, his hands clenching on the armrests. She was already gone, our unborn child with her. Ilara's hand went instinctively to her stomach. But the embryo, we'd created several during the IVF process. Standard procedure. They were in storage at the clinic. Roman's gaze sharpened on her. 3 months after Isabel's death, I decided to move forward with the surrogacy anyway. I wasn't ready to let go of the last piece of her I had left. So you found someone to carry your child. I found a reputable agency, vetted candidates carefully, made sure everything was legal and consensual. His expression hardened. What I didn't account for was corruption inside the clinic itself. Someone on my payroll feeding information to my enemies, someone who saw an opportunity to sabotage the process. Ilara's mind raced. They implanted the embryo in me specifically because I'm her twin. I believe so, though I'm still trying to determine who orchestrated it and why. Roman leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What I do know is that the moment you became pregnant with my child, you became a target. Killing you eliminates the heir. Kidnapping you provides leverage against me. Either scenario serves my enemies well. Then why not just terminate the pregnancy? Ilara asked bluntly. Why drag me here? Why go through all this? Roman's pale eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because that child is all I have left of Isabel. And now that I know you're her twin, that genetically you're his family too, I can't treat you as expendable. He paused. Even if that would be simpler. Ilara didn't know what to say to that. The pragmatic cruelty of it collided with something that almost sounded like humanity, creating a cognitive dissonance she couldn't quite parse. Before she could respond, the door to the study opened. Marcus appeared, his expression tight. Sir, we have a situation. Roman was on his feet immediately, all traces of vulnerability vanishing behind a mask of cold authority. What kind of situation? Perimeter breach, east wall, 3 unknowns, heavily armed. Ilara's blood turned to ice. Roman turned to her, his voice clipped and absolute. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Marcus or myself. What's happening? Exactly what I warned you about. He was already moving toward the door, Marcus falling into step beside him. Stay away from the windows. Don't make yourself visible. Then they were gone, and Ilara was alone in the study with photographs of her dead twin sister staring at her from the mantel. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The reality of her situation, not just trapped but actively hunted, crashed over her with enough force to make her knees weak. Then survival instinct kicked in. Ilara locked the door as Roman had ordered, then moved away from the windows. She could hear shouting somewhere in the distance, the unmistakable crack of gunfire. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The baby. She had to protect the baby. The thought came unbidden, instinctive. This child might not have been her choice, but it was real, growing inside her, depending on her. Ilara pressed herself into the corner farthest from any exterior wall and tried to slow her breathing. Panic wouldn't help. Panic would just make her stupid. More gunfire. Closer this time. Then silence. The silence was somehow worse than the noise. Ilara counted her heartbeats. 100, 200. She'd lost track somewhere around 400 when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, deliberate. She held her breath. A knock on the door, 3 sharp raps. "Miss Quinn, it's Marcus. You can open the door." Alara didn't move. "How do I know it's really you?" A pause. Then, "You asked me this morning how long I'd worked for Mr. Vale. I said 5 years. You said that was vague." The knot in Alara's chest loosened fractionally. She crossed to the door and unlocked it with shaking hands. Marcus stood on the other side, blood splattered across his shirt. Not his blood, Alara realized with a sickening lurch. Someone else's. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately. "No, I'm... What happened? Is Roman... Mr. Vale is fine. The threat has been neutralized." Marcus stepped into the room, his eyes scanning every corner before returning to her face. "He wants you moved to a more secure location within the house. The panic room." Panic room. Alara's laugh came out slightly hysterical. "Of course there's a panic room." Marcus didn't smile. "This way." He led her through a maze of hallways Alara hadn't seen before. Servants' passages, maybe, or just routes designed to be invisible to casual guests. They passed 2 other security personnel, both armed, both looking as grim as Marcus. The panic room turned out to be in the basement. A reinforced steel door opened onto a space that looked like a luxury hotel suite crossed with a military bunker. Comfortable furniture, well-stocked kitchen, and walls that probably could withstand a direct missile strike. "Wait here," Marcus said. "Mr. Vale will come down when he's finished with cleanup." "Cleanup?" Alara's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "You mean the bodies?" Marcus's expression softened slightly. "You're safe. That's what matters." Then he was gone, and Alara was alone again. She sank onto the sofa, because of course there was a sofa, because even panic rooms in Roman Vale's world had to be furnished with expensive leather, and tried to process what had just happened. People had come to kill her, to kill the baby, and Roman security had stopped them. The violence of it should have terrified her more than it did. Instead, all Alara felt was a strange numbness, like her brain had hit its capacity for processing impossible situations and simply shut down the overflow. She didn't know how long she sat there before the steel door opened again and Roman appeared. He'd changed clothes. No more blood-spattered suit. But there was something in his eyes, something cold and final, that told Alara exactly what kind of cleanup he'd been overseeing. "Are you hurt?" His first question, just like Marcus's had been. "No." Roman nodded once, then moved to the small bar built into one wall. He poured himself 2 fingers of something amber and drank it in a single swallow. "Who were they?" Alara asked. "Mercenaries. Hired by someone who knew exactly when and where to strike." He poured another drink but didn't touch it yet. "Which means we have a leak. Someone inside my organization feeding information to my enemies. So this will happen again. Not here. Not like this." Roman finally turned to face her fully. "I'm moving you somewhere safer. A property upstate, completely off the books. Only a handful of people will know the location." Alara's laugh was bitter. "Another cage, just a different one. A cage that keeps you alive." Roman's voice was hard. "You can resent me all you want for that, but you're alive to resent me, which is more than you'd be if I'd left you to your own devices." He wasn't wrong. Alara hated that he wasn't wrong. "When?" "Tonight. We move in 2 hours." Roman finally picked up the second drink, studying the amber liquid. "Pack whatever you want to bring. Irina will help you." "And if I refuse to go?" Roman's pale eyes lifted to hers. "Then I'll have you sedated and moved anyway. I'd prefer not to, but I will." There it was. The truth beneath all the careful consideration and almost gentle explanations. Roman Vale would do whatever was necessary to protect his unborn child, including treating Alara like cargo if she forced his hand. "I hate you," she said quietly. "I know." He drank the whiskey. "But hate me alive rather than dead. It's a better arrangement for everyone." Before Alara could respond, her phone, the one they'd returned to her that morning, wiped clean of all her contacts and apps, buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, frowning. A text from an unknown number. Her blood turned cold as she read it. "Did Roman tell you how Isabel really died? Ask him about the baby. Ask him why she was driving that night." Alara's hand shook as she looked up at Roman. "What?" he asked immediately, reading her expression. What's wrong? She held out the phone without speaking. Roman's face went completely blank as he read the message. Then something dark and dangerous slid across his features, something that reminded Alara exactly how violent this man could be when pushed. Who sent this? His voice was ice. I don't know. Unknown number. Roman pulled out his own phone, barking orders at whoever answered on the other end. Trace the number, find the source, lock down all communications. He ended the call and looked at Alara with an expression she couldn't quite read. Whatever they're trying to imply. Just tell me the truth, Alara interrupted. Was Isabel pregnant when she died? Beyond the embryos you'd already created? Roman's silence was answer enough. She was 14 weeks along, he said finally. We'd just started telling people. She was driving to meet her doctor for a routine checkup when the accident happened. Alara's mind raced. But you said the embryos were created during IVF. Why would you need IVF if she was already pregnant? The IVF was earlier, before she conceived naturally. Roman's jaw was tight. We'd been trying for years. Multiple rounds of treatment. The embryos were created as a precaution in case natural conception didn't work. Then it did. We thought we'd finally gotten our miracle. And someone killed her for it. Yes. The single word carried the weight of mountains. Alara looked down at the text again. The implication was clear. Someone wanted her to doubt Roman's version of events. To think there was more to the story than he'd told her. Why was she driving herself? Alara asked. If you're this powerful, this paranoid about security, why wasn't she protected? Roman's expression turned to stone. She insisted on independence, on maintaining her own life separate from mine. I had security follow her, but at a distance. She hated feeling watched. His hands clenched. That day, she left the house early, before her usual detail was in position. By the time my people realized she'd gone ahead alone, it was too late. So, she died because of a scheduling error. She died because I underestimated how far my enemies would go. Roman's voice was raw. I thought they'd come after me directly. I didn't think they'd target the one person I actually loved. The pain in his voice was real. Alara could hear it, could feel it resonating in the air between them. But the text message planted seeds of doubt she couldn't quite uproot. Who benefits from making me question you? She asked. Anyone who wants to drive a wedge between us. Who wants you frightened and isolated enough to make a mistake? Roman moved closer, his pale eyes intense. Alara, I won't lie to you. I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more terrible things before this is over. But I didn't kill Isabel. And I would never hurt the child she wanted. Alara wanted to believe him. The rational part of her brain knew that if Roman wanted her dead, she'd be dead already. He'd had dozens of opportunities. But the text message was a reminder that she didn't actually know anything about the world she'd been dragged into. The alliances. The enemies. The complex web of violence and loyalty that apparently surrounded Roman Vale's empire. I need time, she said, to think about all of this. You have 2 hours. Roman's voice was back to business. Then we move, whether you're ready or not. He left without another word, the steel door closing behind him with a pneumatic hiss that sounded almost like a sigh. Alara looked down at her phone again, at the message that had appeared from nowhere, designed to unsettle and disturb. Ask him about the baby. But she had asked, and Roman had answered. The question was whether she believed him. Irina appeared 90 minutes later with empty suitcases and a brisk attitude that suggested she'd packed for emergency evacuations before. Clothes first, she said, already moving toward the bedroom that had been prepared for Alara on this level. Comfortable things. You will be in a new place for many weeks, maybe months. Sounds like paradise, Alara muttered. Irina gave her a sharp look. You think this is bad? You should see what happens to people Mr. Vale doesn't protect. She started pulling clothes from drawers, folding them with military precision. My daughter was in bad situation. Terrible man. Mr. Vale helped her disappear, gave her new identity, new life. She is safe now. Happy. He's not a saint, Irina. No, but he keeps his promises. The older woman paused, a sweater held loosely in her hands. Mrs. Isabel used to say that. Roman is many things, but he always keeps his word.
If he says you are protected, you are protected. Ilara wanted to argue, to point out that protection that came with imprisonment wasn't really protection at all. Instead, she found herself helping pack, choosing which clothes to bring, which books from the small library someone had stocked in the panic room. Small, stupid decisions that felt like the only control she had left. They were nearly finished when Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Convoy's ready. We leave in 15 minutes. Convoy. Ilara looked up from the suitcase she'd been filling. How many vehicles? 4, 2 ahead, 2 behind, all armored. We'll have air support tracking until we're clear of the city. The scale of it was absurd, like she was some kind of head of state being moved through a war zone. Except the war zone was real. The people trying to kill her were real, and the baby growing inside her was the prize everyone wanted. Ilara zipped the last suitcase closed and straightened, pressing a hand to her lower back. The ache there had been building all day. Stress, probably. Or just the physical reality of being pregnant. "Let's get this over with," she said. Marcus and another guard carried her luggage while Ilara followed Irina through more hidden passages. They emerged in an underground garage that looked like it could house a small army. Black SUVs with tinted windows. Sedans that probably cost more than most people made in a year. And in the center, a vehicle that looked more like a tank than a civilian car. Roman stood beside it, talking quietly with a man Ilara didn't recognize. When he saw her approach, he broke off the conversation and moved to intercept her. "You'll ride with me," he said. Not a question. "Do I have a choice?" Not particularly. At least he was honest about it. Roman opened the rear door of the armored vehicle and gestured for Ilara to climb in. The interior was surprisingly comfortable. Leather seats, climate control, enough legroom that even someone tall wouldn't feel cramped. Ilara buckled herself in while Roman slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a vault ceiling. 2 hours, Roman said to the driver. "Stay on the route we discussed. No deviations." "Yes, sir." The convoy pulled out in precise formation. 2 vehicles ahead, the armored car in the middle, 2 more behind. They moved through the underground garage toward what looked like a solid wall, until it slid open, revealing a private road that bypassed the main gates entirely. Ilara watched the mansion disappear behind them through the tinted windows. Part of her felt relief at leaving. Another part whispered that she was just trading one cage for another. They drove in silence for the first 30 minutes. The city gave way to suburbs, then to stretches of highway bordered by forests that looked black in the darkness. Ilara kept her eyes on the window, watching the world slide past. "You should try to sleep," Roman said eventually. "It's a long drive." "I'm not tired." "You're exhausted. I can see it." Ilara turned to look at him. In the dim light from the dashboard, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. He looked tired too, she realized. The kind of bone-deep weariness that came from carrying too much for too long. "How do you do it?" she asked. "Live like this constantly, always waiting for the next attack." Roman was quiet for a moment. "You get used to it. The hypervigilance becomes normal. You learn to sleep light, react fast, trust no one completely." He glanced at her. "It's not a life I'd wish on anyone." "But it's the life you're forcing on me. Only temporarily, until the threat is neutralized and appropriate measures are in place." "You keep saying that. But what if the threat is never neutralized? What if this is just how things are in your world?" Roman's jaw tightened. "Then I'll make sure you and the child are protected anyway, whatever that requires." His certainty should have been comforting. Instead, it just reminded Ilara how completely her autonomy had been stripped away. She turned back to the window, watching the dark trees blur past. Somewhere out there was her old life. Her tiny apartment with the broken dishwasher and the view of the neighbor's brick wall. Her portfolio of design work that had never quite translated into stable income. The freedom to make her own terrible decisions. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else now. "I want to know more about her," Ilara said abruptly. "About Isabel, what she liked, what she hated, everything." Roman shifted beside her. She could feel his gaze on her profile. "Why?" "Because she was my sister. Because I have a right to know who she was." Ilara finally looked at him again. "And because if I'm going to carry her child, I want to understand what kind of person she was. What she would have wanted for him." Something in Roman's expression softened fractionally. She loved old movies. The black and white ones from the 40s and 50s. She said modern films were too polished, too self-aware. He paused, seeming to gather memories. She collected vintage jewelry. Not expensive pieces, just things with history. She'd spend hours in antique shops looking for brooches or earrings with stories attached. Alara felt a strange pang in her chest. She'd always been drawn to vintage things too, old buildings with character, furniture with wear marks that told stories. What else? She couldn't cook to save her life, burned water somehow. But she loved good food, so we had a chef who tolerated her constant presence in the kitchen, asking questions. Roman's mouth curved slightly. She wanted to learn. She just never had the patience to follow recipes properly. Sounds frustrating. It was charming. The fondness in his voice was undeniable. Everything about her was charming, even the parts that should have been annoying. They talked for the next hour, Roman sharing pieces of Isabel's life while Alara listened, hungry for details about the sister she'd never known. The woman who shared her DNA but had lived a completely different existence. Isabel had been bold where Alara was cautious, confident where Alara second-guessed herself. She'd walked into dangerous situations because she believed in her ability to navigate them. And it had gotten her killed. The thought sobered Alara, reminded her that whatever similarities she shared with her twin, their outcomes had diverged sharply. Isabel was dead. Alara was alive. And the child that should have been Isabel's was growing inside Alara's body instead. The cosmic cruelty of it made her want to scream. Instead, she pressed her hand to her stomach and felt the slight swell there. Real. Undeniable. "We're close," the driver said from the front seat. Alara looked out the window. They'd left the highway some time ago, now traveling on increasingly narrow roads through dense forest. No streetlights, no other vehicles, just darkness and trees. Finally, the convoy turned onto a private drive marked only by a stone pillar with no signage. They followed it for another 10 minutes before a house appeared through the trees. Calling it a house felt inadequate. It was a sprawling compound built into the hillside, all stone and glass and architectural ambition. Lights glowed from within, warm against the cold darkness outside. The convoy pulled up to the main entrance. Guards emerged from the shadows. More security, Alara realized. This place was just as fortified as the mansion, just better hidden. Roman climbed out first, then offered Alara his hand. She ignored it and got out on her own, immediately regretting it when her stiff legs nearly buckled. Roman caught her elbow, steadying her. "Stubborn," he muttered. "Independent," Alara corrected. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. The interior was beautiful in a way that felt more lived in than the mansion. Comfortable furniture, artwork that looked chosen for personal taste rather than investment value. A stone fireplace with logs already crackling. "Master suite is upstairs," Roman said, leading her through the main room. "Your things are already being unpacked. There's a nursery being prepared in the adjacent room." Alara stopped walking. "A nursery? You're already planning for after the birth." "Of course." Roman turned to face her. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought—" Alara stopped, not sure what she'd thought. "I assumed you'd have the baby somewhere else, a hospital, somewhere professional. We'll have a full medical team here when the time comes, but I want my son born somewhere safe, somewhere I control." His gaze was steady. "This is his home, Alara. It's yours too, for as long as you're carrying him." The possessiveness in his voice should have angered her. Instead, it just made her tired. "Show me the room," she said quietly. Roman led her upstairs to a suite that managed to be both spacious and somehow cozy. Large bed, sitting area, windows that overlooked the forest with the same bulletproof quality as the ones in the mansion. And through a connecting door, visible even from where Alara stood, was the nursery. She moved toward it before she could stop herself. The room was only partially finished, furniture still being assembled, walls painted a soft gray blue. But there was already a crib, a rocking chair, shelves waiting for books and toys. "Isabel picked the color," Roman said from behind her. "Before she died. She wanted something neutral but warm, said a child's room should feel like a refuge." Alara pressed her hand to the doorframe, emotions she couldn't name rising in her throat. This should have been Isabel's moment, Isabel's nursery, Isabel's baby. Instead, it was Alara standing here, Alara carrying the child, Alara living the life her twin sister had died before she could complete. "I'm tired," she said, her voice rough. "I need to sleep." "Of course." Roman stepped back, giving her space. "If you need anything, there's a call button by the bed. Someone will respond immediately." Alara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She waited until Roman left before letting the tears come. Silent. Angry. Grieving for a sister she'd never known and a life she'd never chosen. The baby shifted inside her, just a flutter, barely perceptible, but real. So terribly, impossibly real. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from somewhere below. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in her Brooklyn apartment, that everything had been some kind of stress-induced fever dream. Then she felt the weight in her abdomen, the slight pressure against her bladder that meant the baby was real and growing and impossible to ignore. She pushed herself upright with a groan, her back protesting the movement. 4 months pregnant now, according to the doctor who'd examined her yesterday. 4 months of carrying a child she hadn't agreed to, in a body that felt less like her own with each passing day. The bedroom was exactly as she remembered from last night. Too large, too luxurious, too much like a gorgeous trap. Through the windows, she could see forest stretching in every direction. No neighbors. No other houses visible. Just trees and sky and the kind of isolation that probably cost a fortune to maintain. Alara made her way to the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and tried to recognize the woman staring back at her from the mirror. Same dark hair, though she hadn't bothered styling it in weeks. Same eyes, though they looked harder now. More wary. Isabel's eyes, she thought. Her dead twin's face looking back at her. The thought still felt surreal, like something from a badly written thriller rather than actual life. She dressed in loose pants and a sweater. Everything was loose now, designed to accommodate a body that was changing faster than she could accept, and made her way downstairs. The smell of coffee grew stronger as she descended. She followed it to a kitchen that managed to be both professional grade and somehow homey, all granite counters and copper pots hanging from a rack above the island. Roman stood at the stove, flipping what looked like an omelet. Alara stopped in the doorway, genuinely surprised. "You cook?" He glanced over his shoulder, his pale eyes assessing her in that way he had, like he could read her physical state from across a room. "I do many things people don't expect." He plated the omelet and gestured to the island. "Sit. You need to eat. I'm not hungry. The baby is. Sit." Alara bristled at the command but found herself obeying anyway. She was hungry, despite her claims otherwise. Starving, actually. In that specific way, pregnancy made her crave food and reject it in equal measure. Roman set the plate in front of her along with orange juice and a selection of fresh fruit. The omelet was perfectly golden, filled with vegetables and cheese that smelled divine. "Where's Irina?" Alara asked, picking up her fork. "I gave her the morning off. Thought you might prefer fewer people hovering." Roman poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter opposite her. "How did you sleep?" "Badly." Alara took a bite of the omelet and had to suppress a sound of appreciation. It was delicious. "Your bed is too soft. I'll have it replaced." "That's not—" She stopped, realizing he was serious. "Don't replace the bed. I'm just complaining." "You're entitled to complain." Roman sipped his coffee, watching her eat with that same assessing gaze. "The situation is not what you chose." "No, it's not." They sat in silence while Alara worked through the omelet. She could feel Roman's attention on her, heavy and constant. It should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, she found it oddly steadying, like having a guard dog that happened to be extremely dangerous but had decided she was worth protecting. "We need to talk," Roman said when she'd finished eating. "About what happens next." Alara set down her fork. "You mean about how long I'm staying in this gilded cage?" "I mean about the people who attacked us, about the leak in my organization, about keeping you alive long enough to deliver my son safely." His voice was level, but she could hear the steel underneath. "Someone inside my operation fed information to my enemies, someone I trusted, and until I find out who, nowhere is completely safe." "Then what's the point of moving me here?" "Damage control. Limiting who knows your location, making it exponentially harder for anyone to get to you." Roman set down his coffee cup. "But I need you to understand something. The people hunting us, they're not going to stop. They can't afford to. My son represents the continuation of everything I've built. To my enemies, that's an existential threat. Ilara's hand went instinctively to her stomach. So what? I just hide here forever? You hide here until I eliminate the threat, which I will. The certainty in his voice was absolute, but it requires time, resources, and unfortunately, some risk. What kind of risk? Roman hesitated, which was unusual enough that Ilara's chest tightened. The kind where I need to draw them out, make them think they have an opening. He met her eyes. I need to make them believe you're vulnerable. Ilara's stomach dropped. You want to use me as bait. I want to create a scenario where they feel confident enough to make a move, then crush them completely. Roman's expression was cold now, ruthless. But I won't do it without your consent. If you say no, we find another way. It just takes longer. And in the meantime, I stay locked up. Yes. Ilara pushed back from the island, pacing to the windows. The forest outside looked peaceful, deceptively safe. What exactly would this scenario involve? A controlled exposure. You'd appear to be alone, inadequately guarded. We'd leak the information through channels I know are compromised. When they strike, my people will be ready. Roman moved closer but didn't touch her. The risk is real, but so is the protection. I won't let them take you. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can make the odds extremely favorable. Ilara turned to face him, studying this man who'd upended her entire existence. He looked different in the morning light, less like a crime lord from a movie and more like someone who'd been carrying impossible weight for too long. Why should I trust you? Because if I wanted you dead, you would be. Because I've had 100 opportunities to eliminate you as a complication, and I've chosen protection instead. His jaw tightened. And because, despite what you think of me, I keep my promises. I promise to keep you safe. I will. Ilara wanted to argue, to point out all the ways he'd already failed to keep her safe by dragging her into this nightmare in the first place. But the baby shifted inside her, stronger now than it had been even a week ago, and she thought about spending the next 5 months trapped in this beautiful prison, waiting for threats that might never materialize into actual attacks. How long? She asked. If I agree to this insane plan, how long until it's over? Days? Maybe a week? They'll move fast once they think they have an opportunity. And then? And then I make sure they can never threaten my family again. The way he said family made something twist in Ilara's chest. Any of them. She should say no. Every rational instinct screamed at her to refuse, to take the safer option even if it meant longer imprisonment. But Ilara was tired of being afraid, tired of feeling like prey. And some angry, reckless part of her wanted to face the people hunting her head-on rather than hiding forever. I have conditions, she said. Roman's expression didn't change, but she saw something shift in his eyes. Respect, maybe? Or recognition? Name them. I want to know everything. The plan, the backup plans, who's involved. No more information on a need-to-know basis. Ilara crossed her arms. And when this is over, when the threat is gone, I want real freedom to decide what happens next, not just your version of safe. Agreed. No hesitation. Just like that? You're the one taking the risk. You deserve transparency. Roman pulled out his phone. I'll have Marcus bring up the operational details. We meet in an hour to go over everything. He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. Ilara, thank you. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After he left, she stood at the window for a long time, watching clouds move across the sky and wondering if she'd just made the stupidest decision of her life. The baby kicked, a real kick this time, unmistakable, and Ilara pressed her hand to the spot. Your father is insane, she whispered. And apparently, so am I. The war room, as Marcus called it, turned out to be a converted study on the second floor. Maps covered one wall, computer monitors on another, a conference table in the center surrounded by chairs that had probably hosted dozens of illegal strategy sessions. Roman stood at the head of the table, flanked by Marcus and two other men Ilara didn't recognize. One was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen violence up close and learned to live with it. The other was younger, barely 30, with a nervous energy that manifested in constant small movements. "Ms. Quinn," the older man nodded politely. "I'm Victor, head of security operations. This is Danny, our intelligence specialist." Danny raised a hand in an awkward wave. Alara took the seat Roman pulled out for her, suddenly aware that she was the only woman in the room. The only person who wasn't trained for violence or strategy or whatever else these men did in their professional capacities. "Walk her through it," Roman said, settling into the chair beside her. Victor moved to the maps on the wall. Red pins marked various locations. Blue lines connected them in patterns Alara couldn't decipher. "We've identified 3 primary groups with motive to eliminate the heir," Victor began. "The Volkov faction out of Brighton Beat, the Chen organization operating in Chinatown, and a wild card. Mercenaries we believe are being funded by someone inside your own operation, Mr. Vale." "The leak," Alara said. "Correct." Victor tapped one of the red pins. "We've narrowed the suspects to 5 individuals with access to sensitive information, but we haven't been able to identify which one is compromised. So you want to feed them all the same false information and see who bites," Alara guessed. "Essentially." Danny leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the table. "We leak that you're being moved to a medical facility in Westchester for prenatal care. Limited security detail. Vulnerable window of approximately 3 hours. But I won't actually be there." "You will." Roman's voice was firm. "That's what makes it convincing. You'll be at the facility receiving actual medical care. But the security you'll appear to have is a fraction of what will actually be present." Alara's pulse quickened. "You're serious? You actually want me there?" "The threat has to be credible," Victor said. "If you're not present, they'll suspect a trap. But with you there, they'll commit fully. Bring their best people. Give us a chance to eliminate the threat permanently." "By eliminate, you mean kill." Victor's expression didn't change. "Yes." The bluntness of it was almost refreshing. No euphemisms, no pretending this was anything other than what it was. "Show me the facility," Alara said. Danny pulled up blueprints on one of the monitors. A medical building, 3 stories, surrounded by parking and what looked like well-maintained grounds. Standard suburban medical complex. "You'll enter through the main entrance with 1 visible guard," Danny explained. "Appear to go to the 3rd floor for your appointment. In reality, you'll be in a reinforced exam room with concealed positions for our people." "How many?" 15 inside the building. Another 20 in surrounding positions. Sniper support on adjacent rooftops. Air assets on standby. Victor's tone was matter-of-fact. "If they come for you, we'll be ready." Alara studied the blueprints, trying to find the flaws in the plan. There had to be flaws. There were always flaws. What if they don't take the bait? What if they realize it's a trap? "Then we've lost nothing except time," Roman said, "and we move to more aggressive measures." "What kind of measures?" His pale eyes met hers, and she saw the predator beneath the careful civility. "The kind I'd prefer not to discuss in front of you." "Fair enough." "When?" Alara asked. 3 days? Roman leaned back in his chair. "We start leaking information tomorrow through multiple channels. Give them time to plan. Then we execute." 3 days. 72 hours to prepare for people to try to kill her while Roman's private army waited in the shadows. "I want a weapon," Alara said abruptly. The room went silent. "Absolutely not," Roman said. "Why? Because you don't trust me not to shoot you?" "Because you're not trained. You'd be more likely to hurt yourself than defend yourself effectively." Alara leaned forward, matching his intensity. "Then train me. I have 3 days. Teach me enough to not be completely helpless if something goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong." "You can't promise that." "You said so yourself." She held his gaze. "I'm agreeing to your plan, but I'm not going in there defenseless. Either you teach me basic self-defense and how to handle a weapon, or I back out right now." Roman's jaw worked. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, the part of him that wanted complete control versus the part that recognized she had a point. 2 hours a day, he said finally. "Marcus will teach you. Basic defensive techniques only. And if I don't think you're ready by the time we execute, the deal is off. Fine. Victor and Danny exchanged glances that suggested they'd just witnessed something unusual. Roman Vale backing down from an argument, apparently, was noteworthy. The rest of the meeting covered logistics, entry times, communication protocols, what to do if things went wrong in various specific ways that all sounded terrifying. By the time they finished, Alara's head was spinning with information, guard rotations, extraction routes, code words that meant everything from proceed as planned to abort immediately. Get some rest, Roman said as the others filed out. Training starts tomorrow morning. Alara nodded, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her. She'd been awake for less than 6 hours and already felt wrung out. She started toward the door, then stopped. Roman. He looked up from the papers he'd been organizing. Why are you doing this, really? Alara turned to face him fully. You could just keep me locked up somewhere. Wait out the pregnancy. You don't have to put yourself at risk to draw out your enemies. Roman was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it before. Because I'm tired of living defensively. Tired of reacting to threats instead of eliminating them. He met her eyes. And because my son deserves to grow up in a world where he doesn't have to constantly look over his shoulder. If I can end this now, I will. Even if it costs you? Especially then. There was something in his expression, a resignation that looked almost like peace, like he'd already accepted whatever price this might demand. Alara wanted to ask more, to dig deeper into whatever drove this man to risk everything for a child that hadn't even been born yet. Instead, she just nodded and left, the weight of what she'd agreed to settling onto her shoulders like a physical thing. Training began at dawn the next morning. Marcus met her in what turned out to be a fully equipped gym in the basement. Mats covered the floor. Weapons lined one wall. Punching bags hung from reinforced ceiling mounts. We'll start with awareness, Marcus said, handing her water. Most people get hurt because they don't see the threat coming. Your job is to stay alert and create distance. For the next 2 hours, he walked her through basic defensive stances. How to break a hold, where to strike if someone grabbed her. Nothing fancy, just practical techniques designed to give her seconds to escape. Alara's body protested every movement. She was pregnant, out of shape, and operating on too little sleep. But she pushed through anyway, driven by the knowledge that in 3 days, her life might depend on these skills. Good, Marcus said when she managed to break his grip on her wrist for the 5th time in a row. You're getting it. I'm sweating through my shirt and my back is screaming. That means you're working hard enough. He handed her more water. Take 5. Then we'll do firearms basics. The gun he showed her was smaller than she'd expected, compact, designed to be concealed easily. This is a 9mm, Marcus explained, keeping it pointed at the ground. Semi-automatic. 15-round capacity. We're not going to make you an expert in 3 days, but I can teach you enough to not shoot yourself if you need to use it. He walked her through the mechanics. Loading, safety, stance, breathing, all delivered in that calm, professional tone that made it feel almost normal. When he finally let her fire at targets downrange, the recoil surprised her. The noise, even through ear protection, was overwhelming. But she kept shooting, adjusting her grip, her stance, her breathing, until she could hit the paper target consistently. Not well, but consistently. You're not going to win any competitions, Marcus said. But if someone's close enough, you could probably convince them to back off. That's the goal, right? Survive long enough for your people to eliminate the threat. Exactly. They trained for another hour before Marcus called it. Alara stumbled upstairs, every muscle burning, and found Roman in the kitchen again. How'd she do? He asked Marcus. Better than expected. She doesn't quit. No. Roman's eyes tracked Alara as she collapsed into a chair. She doesn't. He set a plate of food in front of her, grilled chicken, vegetables, rice. All healthy, all designed to fuel a pregnant body that was being pushed too hard. Eat, then shower, then sleep. Yes, sir, Alara muttered, too tired to make it sound sarcastic. She ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. Roman sat across from her with his laptop, working on something that probably involved illegal activity, while she shoveled calories into her mouth like fuel. It was weirdly domestic, sitting in a kitchen with someone who was technically her jailer, but who kept cooking for her, who insisted she rest, who looked up periodically to make sure she was actually eating.
Why do you do that? Alara asked. Do what?
Cook.
You have staff. You could have someone else feed me.
Roman closed his laptop. Isabel loved cooking even though she was terrible at it. Being in the kitchen with her was one of the few times she'd slow down. Stop analyzing everything. Just be present. He paused. I suppose it's become habit. A way to feel close to her. Alara's throat tightened. I'm not her. I know. His voice was gentle. But you carry part of her, and that's... He stopped, seeming to search for words. That's enough. They finished the meal in silence. Alara showered afterward, letting hot water work at the knots in her muscles, then collapsed into bed and was asleep before she could overthink any of it. The next 2 days passed in a blur of training, eating, sleeping, and trying not to think too hard about what was coming. Marcus pushed her harder each session. Roman watched sometimes, his expression unreadable. Victor and Danny came and went, updating plans, adjusting variables. On the second night, Alara found herself in the nursery again. The room was nearly complete now. Furniture assembled, shelves stocked with books and soft toys. A mobile hanging above the crib with little stars and moons that probably cost more than her former monthly rent. It's ready, Roman's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. Apparently crime lords could move quietly when they wanted to. He's not even born yet. I want everything perfect when he is. Roman moved to stand beside her, both of them looking at the empty crib. Isabel had very specific ideas about what a nursery should feel like. Safe, warm, loved. She sounds like she would have been a good mother. She would have been extraordinary. The grief in his voice was raw. She wanted this so badly, talked about it constantly. What she'd teach him, how she'd protect him while also letting him make mistakes. Alara's hand rested on her stomach. Are you going to tell him about her? When he's old enough to understand? Every day. Roman's pale eyes found hers. He'll know exactly who his mother was, what she stood for, how much she wanted him. And what will you tell him about me? The question hung in the air between them. That you gave him life when his mother couldn't. That you were brave enough to stand between him and the people who wanted him dead. Roman turned to face her fully. That you were family, even before you knew it. Alara's eyes stung. She blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. I should sleep. Big day tomorrow. Alara. Roman's hand caught her wrist gently. You can still back out. Say the word, and we find another way. She could. She absolutely could. But the baby kicked right then, a firm push against her ribs. And Alara thought about spending the next 5 months hiding, living in fear, never knowing when the next attack might come. No, she said. We end this tomorrow. Roman's grip tightened briefly, then released. Then get some rest, and trust that I'll keep you safe. Alara wanted to tell him that trust wasn't something she could just decide to give, that he'd have to earn it through actions, not words. Instead, she just nodded and went to bed, where she lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling and trying to convince herself she wasn't making a catastrophic mistake. Morning came too fast. Alara dressed in the clothes that had been laid out for her, regular maternity wear, nothing special. The whole point was to look vulnerable, unprepared. She met the team at the garage. 4 vehicles this time. Roman would ride in one, Alara in another with Marcus. The other 2 carried additional security that would peel off before they reached the medical facility. Comms check, Victor said, fitting an earpiece into Alara's ear. Can you hear me? Yes. Good. Leave it in. We'll be able to track you and communicate if necessary. Roman appeared at her elbow, his expression harder than she'd seen it, battle ready. Remember the plan. You go in, you get examined by the doctor, who's one of ours, fully briefed. You stay in that exam room until we give the all clear or extraction signal. And if something goes wrong, then you run. Marcus will be with you. He'll get you out. Alara looked at Marcus, who nodded once. Ready? Roman asked. No, absolutely not. Yes, Alara said. They loaded into the vehicles and pulled out, the morning sun just starting to break over the trees. The drive would take 40 minutes to change her mind. To panic, to realize the insanity of what they were doing. Instead, Alara spent the time focusing on her breathing, On the training Marcus had drilled into her, on the weight of the small gun pressed against her lower back, concealed beneath her loose sweater. She could do this. She had to do this. The alternative was living in fear forever. The medical facility appeared exactly as it had in the blueprints. Suburban. Normal. The kind of place where hundreds of pregnant women probably came for routine care every week. Except today, it was a trap, and Alara was the bait. Marcus walked her to the entrance, playing the role of single, visible security. They checked in at reception, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. In her ear, Victor's voice. All positions confirmed. We have eyes on 3 vehicles entering the parking area. Unknown occupants. Stand by. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. The exam room was exactly as promised. Reinforced walls, concealed positions where she knew Roman's people waited. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with steady hands and kind eyes, greeted them professionally. Ms. Quinn, let's get you examined. They went through the motions. Blood pressure, fetal heartbeat check. The doctor kept up a stream of calm medical talk while Alara tried not to think about the fact that somewhere outside, armed men were preparing to kill her. 4 vehicles now, Victor's voice said. All occupants armed, moving toward the building. Estimate contact in 90 seconds. Alara's hand shook. The doctor squeezed her wrist once, reassuring. Contact. Multiple hostiles entering through main and side entrances. Engaging. The sound of gunfire erupted somewhere below them. Distant but unmistakable. Marcus moved to position himself between Alara and the door, weapon drawn. More gunfire. Closer now. They're pushing for the 3rd floor, Victor said, his voice tight. Stand by. The baby kicked, hard, like it could sense Alara's terror. It's okay, she whispered, hand pressed to her stomach. It's going to be okay. The door to the exam room exploded inward. Marcus fired twice before Alara even processed what was happening. The man who'd blown through the door went down hard, weapon clattering across the linoleum. But there were more behind him. 3, 4. Alara couldn't count through the chaos. The doctor shoved Alara toward the far corner where a reinforced panel slid open, revealing the concealed position Victor had mentioned. Hands pulled her through, one of Roman's guards, face grim, already firing back toward the door. Everything was noise. The crack of gunfire so loud it felt like her skull might split. Shouting in languages she didn't recognize. The acrid smell of gunpowder burning her throat. Alara pressed herself against the wall, hands covering her stomach instinctively. Protecting the baby. The only thing that mattered in this nightmare moment. Marcus was still firing, controlled bursts, his voice cutting through the chaos. Victor, we need backup now. They came in heavier than anticipated. En route. Hold position. More gunfire. The distinctive sound of someone screaming, then cutting off abruptly. Alara's hands shook so badly she could barely keep them pressed against her abdomen. This was real. People were dying 10 feet away from her. And if Roman's plan failed, she'd be next. The guard beside her, young, maybe 25, took her round to the shoulder and went down with a grunt. Alara scrambled toward him without thinking, pressing her hands to the wound even as blood poured between her fingers. Stay down, he gasped. Don't... The wall behind them exploded. Not the door. The actual wall. Someone had blown a hole through the reinforced structure, and suddenly there were more hostiles pouring through, and Marcus was turning, firing, but there were too many. Alara grabbed the fallen guard's weapon. Her hands knew what to do from Marcus's training, even as her brain screamed that this was insane, and fired at the closest figure. Missed. Fired again. The recoil nearly knocked her backward, but the figure stumbled. Alara, run! Marcus's voice, hoarse and desperate. She ran. Through another door she hadn't noticed, into a corridor that smelled like antiseptic and fear. Her pregnant body protested every movement, but adrenaline pushed her forward. Behind her, more gunfire, more shouting. In her ear, Victor's voice crackling. Lost visual, floor 3 compromised, get her out. Alara's breathing came in ragged gasps. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with someone in dark tactical gear. Raised the gun before her brain could catch up. Easy. Roman's voice. Roman's hands catching her wrists, steadying the weapon before she could accidentally shoot him. Easy. I've got you. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it nearly buckled her knees. They came through the wall, she managed. Marcus's... There were so many.
I know. Change of plans. Roman was already moving, one hand gripping her arm, the other holding his own weapon with the casual competence of someone who'd done this 100 times. They brought more resources than we anticipated. We need to get you out of the building. They moved quickly through corridors that all looked the same. Twice they encountered hostiles. Both times Roman eliminated them with an efficiency that should have horrified Alara, but instead just felt necessary. Survival trumped moral complexity. They hit a stairwell. Roman pushed her ahead of him, covering their rear as they descended. 2 floors, 3. Victor, where's my extraction? Roman's voice was calm despite everything. North exit, 60 seconds. They burst through a door into what looked like a storage area. Medical supplies stacked on industrial shelving. A loading dock visible through windows streaked with grime. Roman moved to check the exit, and that's when Alara saw the man step from behind the shelving. Gun! She screamed. Roman turned, but not fast enough. The shot caught him high on the left side, spinning him around. He fired back, dropping his attacker, but his own weapon clattered from his hand as he went down on one knee. Roman! Alara rushed to him, her hands finding the wound. Blood soaked through his shirt, hot and too fast. I'm fine. He wasn't fine. His face had gone pale, jaw clenched against pain. Get to the exit. Vehicle should be there. I'm not leaving you.
Alara, shut up.
She grabbed his weapon from the floor with one hand, keeping pressure on his wound with the other. Her training felt distant and useless. Marcus had taught her to shoot, not to perform field medicine on a bleeding crime lord. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell they'd just left. Roman tried to stand, made it halfway up before his leg gave out. He grabbed the shelving for support, breathing hard. Listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice tight with pain. You're going to leave me here and get to that vehicle. That's an order. I don't take orders from you. Alara, no. She ducked under his arm, taking as much of his weight as her pregnant body could manage. We both get out or neither of us does. Choose. His pale eyes met hers, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or just shared stubborn refusal to accept the obvious smart choice. You're impossible, he muttered. So I've been told. They stumbled toward the loading dock exit together. Alara's back screamed in protest. The baby kicked, probably objecting to all this stress. Behind them, voices getting closer. The door burst open and Marcus appeared, blood streaked across his face, but very much alive. Boss! Relief flooded his features. Then he saw the blood. You're hit. Notice that. Help me get her to the vehicle. Help us both, Alara corrected. Marcus didn't argue. He took Roman's other side, and together they made it through the exit and into blinding daylight. A black SUV screeched up to the loading dock, Victor at the wheel. The back door flew open. In! Now! Marcus practically threw Alara into the back seat, then helped Roman in beside her. Victor was already accelerating before the door fully closed, tires screaming as they tore away from the building. Alara immediately pressed her hands back to Roman's wound. The pressure made him hiss through his teeth, but the bleeding was slowing. Maybe. How bad? Victor asked, eyes on the road as he took a corner too fast. I've had worse. Roman's voice was steadier than it should have been. Status? Building is lost. We eliminated maybe 15 hostiles total, but they had reinforcements we didn't account for. Danny's coordinating cleanup. Victor's jaw was tight. We got played, boss. Someone fed them our entire plan. Roman's expression went cold despite the blood loss. The leak. Has to be. They knew exactly where our positions were. Came in through points we thought were secure. Alara kept pressure on Roman's wound while her mind raced. They'd walked into a trap, thinking they were setting one. Someone inside Roman's organization had sold them out completely. Who knew the full plan, she asked. 5 people, Marcus said from the front passenger seat. The same 5 we've been watching. Then it's time to stop watching and start acting. Roman's voice was hard. Victor, take us to the secondary location, not the upstate house. The building in Red Hook. Boss, you need a hospital. I need answers more. Red Hook, now. Victor didn't argue further, just changed course. Alara felt the vehicle accelerate even more, weaving through traffic with practiced precision. She looked down at Roman's wound. The bleeding had definitely slowed, but his shirt was soaked through.
His face had gone from pale to nearly gray. "You're going to pass out," she said. "Probably." He managed something that might have been a smile. "But not yet." "You're an idiot." "So I've been told." Despite everything, Alara felt her mouth twitch. The absurdity of bandying words with a wounded crime lord while fleeing from people who wanted to kill them both should have broken something in her brain. Instead, it felt almost normal. Maybe that was the real sign she'd lost her mind. The drive took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Alara kept talking to Roman, forcing him to stay conscious, asking him questions about Isabel, about the business, about anything that would keep him focused and alert. "She hated violence," Roman said at one point, his voice going distant. "Isabel hated everything about this life, but she understood it was necessary, that sometimes protecting people means doing terrible things." "Is that what you tell yourself?" "It's what she told me." His eyes found Alara's. "She said I wasn't a good man, but I could be a good father, that the two things didn't have to be mutually exclusive." "Do you believe that?" "I'm about to find out." The vehicle pulled into what looked like an abandoned warehouse district, red brick buildings with broken windows and graffiti. Not the kind of place Alara would choose to bring a gunshot victim. But when Victor pulled up to one particular building, a garage door opened immediately. They drove inside to a space that was anything but abandoned, clean, well lit, and clearly set up as some kind of secure operations center. People emerged from doorways, more of Roman's security, Alara assumed. Someone who looked like a medic rushed forward with a kit. "Get him stabilized," Victor ordered. "Then prep the interrogation room." Marcus helped Alara out of the vehicle while the medic went to work on Roman. She stood there, blood on her hands, watching as they cut away his shirt to access the wound. "You should sit," Marcus said gently. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." Alara looked down at her hands. He was right. They trembled uncontrollably, adrenaline crash hitting all at once. Marcus guided her to a chair and pressed a bottle of water into her hands. "Drink. You need to stay hydrated for the baby." The baby, right. Because on top of everything else, she was still pregnant, still carrying the child everyone wanted dead. She drank mechanically, watching the medic work on Roman, watching his face tighten with pain when the man probed the wound, watching him refuse sedation even when offered. "Clean exit wound," the medic announced after what felt like forever. "Missed anything vital. You got lucky, boss." "Lucky." Roman's laugh was harsh. "Get me stitched up. I have work to do." "You need rest. I need to find the person who nearly got my son killed. Patch me up and get out of my way." The medic knew better than to argue. He worked quickly, stitching and bandaging while Roman sat stone-faced. When it was done, someone handed him a clean shirt. Roman stood carefully, testing his range of motion. Grimaced, but nodded. "Bring them all in," he said to Victor. "All 5 suspects. I don't care what excuses they give. I want them here in the next hour." "Already done. They're in holding." "Good." Roman's pale eyes were cold enough to freeze blood. "Let's find out which one sold us out." He started toward a door at the far end of the warehouse, then stopped when he realized Alara was following. "You should rest. There's a room upstairs. Clean. Secure." "I'm coming with you." "Alara, someone betrayed us today. Nearly got us both killed. Nearly killed your son." Her voice was steel. "I want to see their face when you figure out who it was." Roman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but stay behind me, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. Understood?" "Understood." They moved through the building, Marcus and Victor flanking them, both armed and alert. Through corridors that felt industrial and cold, downstairs that echoed with their footsteps. The interrogation room was exactly what Alara expected. Concrete walls, drain in the floor, 5 people lined up against one wall, hands secured behind them, guarded by armed men. Alara recognized some of them from the mansion. Danny, the nervous intelligence specialist, a woman she'd seen in the security room, 3 others whose faces were familiar but names escaped her. All of them looked terrified. Roman walked slowly down the line, his movements controlled despite the fresh wound in his side. His expression gave away nothing. "One of you," he said quietly, "gave detailed operational intelligence to my enemies.
One of you is responsible for the deaths of 6 of my people today. One of you nearly killed the mother of my child. The silence was absolute. I'm going to give you one chance. One, to confess. To explain why. To make this easier on yourself. Roman's voice remained calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. If you confess now, you'll die quickly. If I have to find you through interrogation, it will take days, and you'll beg for death long before I grant it. No one spoke. Roman nodded slowly, then turned to Victor. Start with Danny. He's the weakest. Wait. The woman from the security room lurched forward. Wait, please. It wasn't supposed to. They said no one would get hurt. Roman turned to face her fully. Explain. The woman's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. They have my sister, the Chen organization. They took her 3 months ago. Said they'd kill her if I didn't feed them information. Her voice broke. I didn't have a choice. They were going to kill her. So you sold out my operation instead. I thought, they promised if I gave them enough intel to eliminate the heir, they'd let her go, that it would be over. She was sobbing now. I didn't think they'd hit the facility so hard. I thought your security would handle it. You never meant to get people killed. Roman's voice was ice. But you did. 6 of my people are dead because of your choice. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Roman was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quietly for 30 seconds. Your sister is dead, he said when he ended the call. The Chen organization killed her 2 months ago. You've been working for them for free ever since. The woman's knees buckled. She collapsed completely, wailing. Alara felt sick. Roman turned to Victor. Get her out of my sight. The rest of them are clean. Run them through additional vetting, but they're not our leak. He paused. And find out if the Chen organization has taken anyone else's family members. I want a full accounting by morning. What about her? Victor gestured to the sobbing woman. Roman's expression was carved from stone. Make it quick. She was manipulated, but she still made her choice, and my people are still dead because of it. He walked out without another word. Alara followed, her stomach churning. Behind them, the woman's cries cut off abruptly. She didn't want to know how Victor had silenced her. Roman made it halfway up the stairs before his legs gave out. He caught himself on the railing, breathing hard. Alara was there immediately, supporting his weight. You're an idiot, she said again. You should be in bed, not executing traitors. Had to be done. Could have waited until you weren't bleeding through your bandages. Roman looked down. Fresh blood seeped through his shirt. Apparently so. Marcus appeared from nowhere, taking Roman's other side. Medical suite is this way. And boss, you're staying put this time. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. No, but she is. Marcus nodded toward a woman approaching with another medical kit. And she's mean enough that even you won't argue. The doctor, 50s, iron gray hair, expression that brooked no nonsense, pointed at a nearby room. In? Now. And you cheat? She looked at Alara. You're getting examined too. I can see you favoring your left side. Either you're hurt or the baby is in distress. Alara hadn't even realized she was favoring anything. But now that the doctor mentioned it, her left side did ache. A deep, persistent throb that might have been a pulled muscle or might have been something worse. They ended up in adjacent exam rooms. Alara could hear the doctor scolding Roman through the wall while another medic checked her over. Blood pressure elevated but not dangerous. Baby's heartbeat strong and steady, just bruised ribs from being hauled around during the firefight. You need to rest, the medic said firmly. Real rest, not whatever version of rest you've been doing. I'll rest when I'm dead. The medic gave her a look. That can be arranged if you keep pushing yourself like this. Fair point. When Alara emerged from her exam, Roman was being settled into a bed with an IV line running into his arm. He looked furious about it. 2 hours, the doctor was saying. Then we reassess. But you lost more blood than you're admitting, and that wound needs time to close properly. I don't have 2 hours to... You do now. The doctor's tone left no room for argument. She turned to Alara. You. Talk sense into him. He might actually listen to you. Then she was gone, leaving Alara alone with Roman in the medical suite. They stared at each other for a long moment.
You should sleep, Roman said finally. So should you. I will. In 2 hours. Alara moved to the chair beside his bed and sat, wincing as her bruised ribs protested. We could have died today, she said quietly. I know. Your plan failed, completely. I know that too. And you nearly bled out on a warehouse floor because you refused to go to an actual hospital. Roman's mouth twitched. Are you building to a point? My point is that this is insane, all of it. The violence, the danger, the fact that I'm sitting here covered in blood talking to a wounded crime lord like this is somehow normal now. Welcome to my world, Alara laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. Your world is terrible. Yes, but it's kept my son alive so far. Roman's hand moved to rest on the blanket near where Alara's was. Not touching, but close. And it's kept you alive, which matters more than you probably think it should. Why? Because you're Isabel's sister. Because you're carrying my child. Because despite everything, you're brave enough to stand in that medical facility instead of running when you had the chance. His pale eyes held hers. Because somewhere in this mess, you stopped being just a surrogate and became something else entirely. Alara's breath caught. What else? I don't know yet. Roman's voice was quiet. But I know that when I saw you aim that gun today, saw you cover that guard's wound instead of saving yourself, something shifted. You're not who I thought you were. Neither are you. They sat in silence, the weight of shared trauma and impossible circumstances pressing down on them both. Finally, Roman spoke again. The Chen organization needs to be dealt with, permanently. They've made their move and failed. They won't get another chance. How? Carefully, thoroughly, in a way that sends a message to everyone else considering making a play for my heir. His expression hardened. But first, I need to make sure you're protected. That means changes, more security, different location, possibly a different approach entirely. What kind of approach? Roman was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight Alara hadn't heard before. Marriage. Alara's brain stuttered to a halt. Excuse me? Legal marriage. It would give you protected status. Make you untouchable under the agreements I have with other organizations. And it would give our son legitimate claim to everything I've built. You want to marry me for legal protection. I want to marry you because it's the smartest move strategically, because it consolidates power and eliminates ambiguity about succession, because it makes you family in a way that even my enemies can't ignore. Alara stared at him, trying to process the absurdity of receiving a marriage proposal from a man she'd met less than 2 months ago. A man who'd kidnapped her, trapped her, nearly gotten her killed today. A man who'd also protected her, fed her, shared pieces of his dead wife with her, took a bullet while getting her to safety. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard, she said finally. Roman almost smiled. I'm aware, but it's also practical. And right now, practical is what keeps us alive. You don't love me. No, but I respect you. And that's a better foundation than most marriages have. Alara wanted to argue, to point out all the reasons this was insane. Instead, she thought about the nursery, about the baby growing inside her, about the fact that even if she walked away tomorrow, she'd always be connected to this child, to Roman, to the dangerous world he inhabited. Maybe legal protection wasn't the worst idea. Maybe survival required unconventional choices. I need time to think, she said. You have until I'm released from this bed. Roman's eyes were already closing, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Then we move forward, one way or another. Alara watched him slip into sleep, his breathing evening out. Even unconscious, he looked dangerous, like a weapon temporarily at rest. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the baby shift. Your father is insane, she whispered, and apparently he wants to marry me. What do you think about that? The baby kicked once. Whether it was approval or protest, Alara couldn't tell. She settled deeper into the chair, too exhausted to move upstairs to whatever room they'd prepared for her. Her eyes drifted closed. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Alara Quinn started to think that maybe survival meant more than just staying alive. Maybe it meant choosing to fight for something bigger than herself. Even if that something came wrapped in violence, danger, and a marriage proposal delivered from a hospital bed by a man who'd never pretended to love her. When Alara woke, Roman was already awake, arguing with the doctor about being discharged. 24 hours minimum, the doctor was saying, her voice brooking no argument. You tore 3 stitches already. Move around too much and you'll tear them all. I have work to do. Your work can wait. No, it can't. Roman's voice was hard. Every hour I spend in this bed is an hour my enemies use to regroup. I need to move now. Alara sat up, her own body protesting. The bruised ribs had stiffened overnight, and her back felt like someone had used it as a punching bag. He's right, she said quietly. The doctor turned to her, eyebrows raised. I'm sorry? He's right. Waiting gives them time to plan another attack. Alara stood carefully, moving to Roman's bedside. But he's also an idiot if he thinks he can do this alone. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to clear him for limited activity with strict restrictions, and I'm going to make sure he follows them. Roman looked at her like she'd grown a second head. You're going to make sure, yes, because apparently someone has to keep you from bleeding to death out of sheer stubbornness. Alara turned back to the doctor. What are the restrictions? The doctor studied them both, then sighed. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity. If the wound starts bleeding again, he stops immediately. And he wears a monitoring device so I can track his vitals remotely. Absolutely not, Roman started. Agreed, Alara said over him. Anything else? The doctor rattled off a list of medications, warning signs, and care instructions. Alara committed them all to memory while Roman glowered from the bed. When the doctor finally left, Roman turned that glower on Alara. I don't need a nursemaid. No, you need a keeper, but I'm what you've got. She crossed her arms carefully, mindful of her ribs. Now, what's the plan? You said the Chen organization needs to be dealt with. How? Roman studied her for a long moment. Then he reached for the shirt someone had left folded on the bedside table. Help me up. Alara supported him while he dressed, moving slowly to avoid tearing the fresh bandages. His face went pale twice, but he didn't stop. Victor's been coordinating intel overnight, Roman said as they made their way out of the medical suite. The Chen organization operates out of 3 primary locations in Chinatown, restaurants that serve as fronts. We hit all 3 simultaneously. You mean your people hit them? I mean we hit them. I'll coordinate, but I'm not sitting this one out. You can barely walk. I can walk well enough to oversee an operation. Roman's jaw set in that stubborn line she was coming to recognize. This ends today, Alara, one way or another. They found Victor in what looked like a command center, banks of monitors showing various street views, maps spread across tables, radios crackling with periodic check-ins. Status? Roman asked. Victor looked up, his expression tightening when he saw Roman upright. Teams are in position. We've identified key targets within each location. Say the word and we move. Casualties? Civilian presence is minimal at this hour. We've planned extraction routes to avoid collateral damage, but I can't guarantee 0. Victor's tone was professional, clinical. The Chen organization uses the restaurants as shield. They know we won't burn down public buildings. Then we don't burn them down. We go in surgical, clean, fast. Roman moved to study the maps despite the tightness around his eyes that suggested every step hurt. I want their leadership alive if possible, dead if necessary, but I want answers about who else was involved in yesterday's attack. Understood. Alara watched them work, feeling simultaneously useless and unwilling to leave. This was Roman's world, violence and strategy and cold calculation about acceptable losses. It should have repulsed her. Instead, she found herself asking, "What do you need from me?" Both men turned to look at her. "You should rest," Roman said. "I've been resting. Tell me what I can do." Roman exchanged a glance with Victor, some silent communication passing between them. "Monitor comms," he said finally. "Victor will show you how. Listen to the operation as it unfolds. If you hear anything concerning, flag it immediately." It wasn't much, but it was something other than sitting around feeling helpless. Victor set her up with a headset and showed her which channels to monitor. Within minutes, Alara was listening to terse updates from multiple teams positioned around Chinatown. Alpha team in position. Visual on 3 targets. Bravo ready, waiting for green light. Charlie has eyes on possible secondary exit. Advise. Roman coordinated it all with quiet authority, his voice never rising despite what had to be significant pain. He moved between maps and monitors, adjusting plans in real time based on incoming intelligence. All teams, we are green in 60 seconds, he said finally. Remember, surgical, minimal collateral, leadership alive if possible. The countdown began. Ilara's heart hammered as she listened to the team's confirm readiness. This was really happening. Roman was about to order coordinated strikes on 3 locations, and people were going to die. Execute, Roman said. Chaos erupted across the comms. Alpha breaching now. Contact, contact. Bravo inside, encountering resistance. Charlie, we've got runners heading your direction. Ilara tried to track it all, but the overlapping voices made it nearly impossible. Beside her, Roman and Victor worked in perfect synchronization, issuing orders, redirecting teams, adapting to changing situations. Alpha, civilian in the kitchen, extract and secure. Bravo has 2 HVTs in custody. Charlie engaged, requesting backup. Send Delta to support Charlie, Roman ordered, and get those civilians out of Alpha's location. Now. The operation lasted 15 minutes that felt like hours. When the final all clear came through, Ilara realized she'd been holding her breath. Casualty report, Roman said. 2 injured, non-critical. 0 civilian casualties. We have 5 high-value targets in custody, including Chen's second in command. Roman's expression didn't change, but Ilara saw something release in his shoulders. Bring them here. I want interrogation started within the hour. As the teams began their extraction, Roman finally allowed himself to sink into a chair. His face had gone gray again, and fresh blood seeped through his shirt. You're bleeding, Ilara said. I'm aware. Let me see. Ilara, let me see. He relented, and Ilara carefully lifted his shirt to examine the bandages. 3 stitches had definitely torn. The wound wasn't hemorrhaging, but it needed attention. She found the medical supplies Victor kept nearby and set to work cleaning and rebandaging, her hands steadier than she'd expected. Roman sat perfectly still, watching her face. You're getting good at this, he observed. I'm getting practice I never wanted. Ilara secured the fresh bandage. You need to stop moving around. After the interrogations, you're impossible. So I've been told. Despite everything, Ilara felt her mouth twitch. This man had been shot, had coordinated a military-style operation while bleeding, and was still making dry observations like they were discussing the weather. The captured Chen operatives arrived 30 minutes later. Ilara watched through one-way glass as Roman interrogated them one by one. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten overtly, but there was something in his presence, a cold certainty that he would do whatever was necessary, that broke most of them within minutes. The second in command held out longer. You can't prove anything, the man said, his accent thick. You attack legitimate businesses, you'll have authorities involved. The authorities are already involved, on my payroll. Roman leaned forward despite the pain it obviously caused. But that's irrelevant. You ordered the hit on my surrogate. You coordinated with my traitor to nearly kill the mother of my child. I don't need to prove anything to anyone except myself. You kill me, Chen will retaliate. Chen is dead, killed 30 minutes ago when my people raided his personal residence. Roman's voice was flat. His organization is finished. The only question now is whether you die quickly or slowly. And that depends entirely on what you tell me in the next 5 minutes. The man's face went slack. Chen is... You're lying. Victor, confirmation. Victor held up his phone, showing a photograph that made Ilara's stomach turn. She looked away quickly, but not before registering the body, the blood, the finality. The second in command broke. He talked for 20 minutes straight. Names, connections, other organizations that had been involved in the planning, the full scope of the conspiracy to eliminate Roman's heir. When he finished, Roman stood slowly. Thank you for your cooperation. You said quick if I talked. I did. Roman pulled his weapon. And I keep my promises. Ilara turned away before the shot rang out, her hands pressing against her ears even though it was too late. When she looked back, Roman was already walking out of the interrogation room, his expression completely blank. He found her in the hallway, standing with her back against the wall, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. "You didn't have to watch that," he said quietly.
Yes, I did. Alar's voice was rough. If I'm going to be part of this, if I'm going to marry you and raise a child in your world, I need to understand what that actually means. Roman studied her face. And what does it mean? It means you're not a good man. You've never pretended to be. Alara met his eyes. But you're a man who keeps his word, who protects what's his, and right now that includes me and this baby, so I can live with the rest of it. Something shifted in Roman's expression. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. The other organizations he named, I'll need to address them. Make it clear that any further attempts on my heir will be met with total war. How long will that take? 72 hours, maybe less. Roman reached out, his hand finding hers. Then we get married. Quietly, with legal documentation that makes you untouchable. And we prepare for my son to be born into a world I've made as safe as possible. Alara's fingers tightened on his. And after he's born? What happens to me? Roman was quiet for a moment. That depends on what you want. The original agreement was that you'd be compensated and free to leave. That offer still stands. He paused. But I'm hoping you'll choose to stay. Why? Because my son deserves to know his aunt. Because you're braver than most people I've met. Because somewhere in this mess, I've started to actually respect who you are as a person. His pale eyes held hers. And because Isabel would have wanted you in his life. I'm certain of it. Alara's throat tightened. I haven't decided yet. I know, but you have time. Roman's thumb brushed across her knuckles. All the time you need. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity that Alara observed mostly from the sidelines. Roman reached out to the organizations that had been named during interrogation, having carefully documented conversations that Alara listened to through secure lines. Some were conciliatory, some were threatening. All ended with the same message. The heir was off limits, protected by agreements that transcended normal business disputes. By the third day, Victor confirmed that all parties had agreed to stand down. The immediate threat was over. It won't last forever, Roman told Alara that evening. They were back at the upstate house, the one with the finished nursery and views of endless forest. There will always be ambitious people who think they can make a play, but for now, we have breathing room. Enough to get married? Enough to get married. He pulled out a small box from his jacket pocket. I had this made. You don't have to wear it if you don't want to, but I thought... He opened the box to reveal a ring. Simple platinum band with a single stone. Not a diamond, Alara realized. Sapphire, maybe. Or something else blue. Isabel's birthstone, Roman said quietly. I thought you should have something of hers, since you never got to meet. Alara took the box with shaking hands. The ring was beautiful in its simplicity. Nothing ostentatious, just elegant and meaningful. When? She asked. Tomorrow. I've arranged for a judge who asks no questions, witnesses who can be trusted. It'll be legal and binding, but private. No ceremony. No ceremony. Unless you want one. Alara thought about traditional weddings. White dresses and flowers, and people celebrating love. This wasn't that. This was survival wrapped in legal protection. But it was also something else. Something she was still trying to name. Private is fine, she said. But I want one thing. Name it. I want to know everything about Isabel, not just the highlights, everything. Her flaws, her mistakes, what made her angry, what made her cry. Alara met Roman's eyes. If I'm going to help raise her son, I need to know who she really was. Roman was quiet for a long moment. All right. After the ceremony, I'll tell you everything. The wedding happened in the library of the upstate house, with Victor and Marcus as witnesses, and a judge who clearly knew better than to ask questions about the pregnant bride or the groom who moved carefully due to a recent gunshot wound. Alara wore a simple dress that accommodated her growing stomach. Roman wore a dark suit. They exchanged vows that were purely legal, no poetry or promises of eternal love, just a contract that bound them together under law. When the judge pronounced them married, Roman kissed her, briefly. A formality. But his hand lingered on her face, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost like hope. Afterward, they sat in the study where Alara had first seen Isabel's photographs. Roman poured himself whiskey and Alara juice, and then he talked. He told her about Isabel's temper, how she'd throw things when angry and then feel guilty about it later. About her insecurity around other women who seemed to have their lives together. About the miscarriage she'd had 2 years into their marriage and how it had broken something in her that took months to heal. He told her about Isabel's relationship with her mother, complicated and painful. About the career she'd given up to be with Roman and how she sometimes resented that choice, even though she'd never admit it. He talked for hours, painting a picture of a woman who was brilliant and flawed and human. Not the saint Alara had been building in her head, but a real person who'd made mistakes and tried to do better. She would have liked you, Roman said finally. She would have been jealous of how easily you handle chaos, but she would have liked you. Alara pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the baby shift. I wish I could have met her. So do I. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of shared grief and impossible circumstances binding them together in ways neither had anticipated. The weeks that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Roman worked from the house, managing his empire through secure connections while his wound healed. Alara read everything she could find about pregnancy and childbirth, preparing for something that still felt surreal. They had dinner together most nights, talked about everything from politics to books to whether their son should learn multiple languages from birth. The conversations were easier than they should have been, given the circumstances. And slowly, without either of them acknowledging it, something shifted. Roman started asking Alara's opinion on business decisions. Alara found herself genuinely interested in the legitimate ventures he was building alongside the criminal ones. They debated strategy and ethics and whether it was possible to build something good from a foundation of violence. 6 weeks after the wedding, Alara woke in the middle of the night to find Roman standing in the nursery, staring at the empty crib. Can't sleep? She asked from the doorway. He turned, surprised. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. Your son is using my bladder as a trampoline. She moved to stand beside him. What are you thinking about? Whether I'm capable of being the father he deserves. Roman's voice was quiet. Whether growing up with me will damage him irreparably. Probably, Alara said honestly, but he'll also have me, and I'm going to make sure he knows there are other ways to live, other choices. Roman looked at her. You've decided to stay. I've decided to stay. The certainty in her own voice surprised her. Not because of the marriage or the protection, but because he's my nephew, Isabel's son, and I can't walk away from that. Even knowing what staying means, the danger, the compromises, the moral complexity, even knowing that. Alara pressed her hand to her stomach. Besides, someone needs to keep you from bleeding to death every time you decide to coordinate a military operation while injured. Roman's mouth twitched. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? Never. He reached out, his hand covering hers on her stomach. They stood like that for a long moment, connected by touch and shared purpose, and something that was starting to feel dangerously close to actual partnership. The baby kicked against their joined hands. He's strong, Roman said softly. He has to be. Look who his parents are. Alara paused. Parents. Is that... Are we... Yes. Roman's voice was firm. When he's born, we tell him the truth, that you're his aunt and his mother both, that Isabel gave him life in one way, and you gave it to him in another. No lies, no hiding the complexity. And when he asks about the criminal empire, we tell him the truth about that too, that I've done terrible things, but that I'm trying to build something better for him. Alara nodded slowly. I can work with that. The months that followed passed faster than Alara expected. Her body changed in ways that alternated between fascinating and deeply uncomfortable. Roman attended every doctor's appointment, took notes on fetal development, and asked questions that suggested he'd been reading the same books Alara had. They fought sometimes. About security measures Alara found excessive. About Roman's refusal to fully step back from violent business. About what kind of life they were building and whether it was sustainable. But they also laughed, found common ground in unexpected places. Discovered that despite the insane circumstances that had brought them together, they actually liked each other.
8 months into the pregnancy, Alara's water broke at 3 in the morning. She woke Roman calmly, already timing contractions. It's time. He was on his feet immediately, all business. The medical team was already on standby at the house. Roman had insisted on a home birth with hospital-grade equipment, unwilling to risk the security exposure of a traditional hospital. Labor was brutal. 17 hours of pain that made Alara understand viscerally why childbirth had such a fearsome reputation. Roman stayed with her the entire time, letting her crush his hand during contractions, offering ice chips and encouragement even when she told him to shut up. When the baby finally emerged, screaming and perfect, Alara felt something in her chest crack open. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing him on Alara's chest. "Healthy and strong." Alara stared down at the tiny human she'd carried for 9 months. Dark hair already thick on his head, eyes that would probably be pale like Roman's. Isabel's nose, or maybe hers, they were identical, so who could tell? "He's beautiful," she whispered. Roman stood beside the bed, staring at his son with an expression Alara had never seen on his face before. Wonder, fear, love so intense it looked painful. "Can I—" His voice cracked. "Can I hold him?" Alara carefully transferred the baby to Roman's arms, watched this dangerous, violent man cradle his newborn son like he was made of spun glass. "Hello," Roman said softly. "I'm your father, and I promise, that I will do everything in my power to give you a life worth living." The baby stopped crying, seeming to recognize his father's voice. Alara felt tears streaming down her face. Relief, exhaustion, joy, grief for the sister who should have been here for this moment. "What should we name him?" she asked. Roman looked up, his own eyes suspiciously bright. What did Isabel want? She had a list, but her favorite was Adrian. She said it meant dark one and thought it was appropriately dramatic. Alara laughed through her tears. "Adrian, I like it." "Adrian Vale," Roman said, testing the name. "Yes, that works." They brought the baby back to Alara and she nursed him while Roman sat on the edge of the bed, one hand on her shoulder, the other gently touching Adrian's tiny fist. "We did it," Alara said quietly. "We kept him safe." "We did it together." Roman's hand tightened on her shoulder. "And we'll keep doing it, for as long as he needs us." The first few weeks with a newborn were chaos. Adrian had powerful lungs and used them frequently. Alara and Roman took turns with night feedings, stumbling through the learning curve of new parenthood. But slowly, they found their rhythm. Roman proved surprisingly competent at diaper changes and soothing fussy babies. Alara discovered a patience she didn't know she possessed. And somewhere in the sleep-deprived haze, Alara realized she was happy. Not in spite of the circumstances, but because of them. Because Adrian existed. Because Roman was trying so hard to be a good father. Because they'd built something real from the wreckage of impossible situations. 3 months after Adrian's birth, Alara found Roman in the study again, this time reviewing paperwork. "What's all this?" she asked. "Legal documents. I'm setting up a foundation in Isabel's name. It'll help families in crisis, provide resources for people trying to escape dangerous situations." He looked up. "I thought it was time to start building that better world I promised our son." Alara moved to look over his shoulder at the documents. The foundation was real, well-funded, designed to actually help people rather than just be a tax shelter. "She would have loved this," Alara said softly. "I know." Roman's hand found hers. "It's not enough to make up for everything I've done, but it's a start." That night, after Adrian was finally asleep, Roman and Alara sat together on the terrace overlooking the forest. The stars were visible above the trees, countless and cold and somehow comforting. "Do you ever regret it?" Roman asked. "Agreeing to marry me, choosing to stay." Alara considered the question honestly, thought about her old life, the struggling design business, the freedom that had also been loneliness, the autonomy that had come with constant anxiety about money and the future. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. This isn't the life I would have chosen if you'd asked me a year ago. But it's the life I have now, and I'm building something good from it." "We," Roman corrected, We're building something good.
We, Alara agreed. Roman pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then handed it to her. I want to show you something. It was a photograph from Isabel's phone, recovered from her personal effects. Isabel, at maybe 25, laughing at something off camera, vibrant, alive, so similar to Alara it was uncanny. I look at Adrian sometimes, and I see her, Roman said quietly. The way he scrunches his nose when he's annoyed, the furrow between his eyebrows when he's concentrating. She's still here, in him. And he's lucky, Alara said, because he gets both of us trying to honor her memory, both of us making sure he knows where he came from. Roman's arm slid around her shoulders, and Alara let herself lean into him. This man who'd started as her captor and become her partner, who'd shown her both the worst and best of what human beings were capable of. Thank you, he said, for everything, for staying, for loving our son, for not running when you had every reason to. Thank you for keeping your promises. Alara's hand rested over his, for giving me a family I didn't know I needed. But they sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead, while inside their son slept peacefully in a nursery prepared with love and hope and the memory of a woman they'd both lost but would never forget. 2 years later, Alara stood in that same nursery, watching Adrian sleep in his crib. He was bigger now, no longer an infant, but a toddler with Roman's eyes and Isabel's stubborn chin and a personality that was entirely his own. The foundation Roman had started was thriving. He'd stepped back from the most violent aspects of his business, delegating to trusted people while focusing on legitimate ventures. It wasn't perfect. There were still moral compromises, still danger. But it was better. Alara had started designing again, working from home on projects that interested her. She'd found a new community among the other families in Roman's orbit, people who understood the complexity of loving someone who operated in moral gray areas. And she and Roman had found something she hadn't expected. Not the passionate romance of movies, but something steadier. Partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Affection that had grown from proximity and cooperation into something deeper. They didn't say, "I love you." Neither of them was ready for that weight, but they said other things. "I trust you. I'm glad you're here. We make a good team." And maybe that was enough. Roman appeared in his doorway, freshly showered after a business dinner. He asleep? Finally, he fought it for an hour. Alara moved away from the crib carefully. How was the meeting? Productive. The expansion into legitimate real estate is moving forward. He moved to stand beside her, both of them looking down at their sleeping son. He looks more like Isabel every day. He has your stubborn streak, though. Unfortunately, Roman's hand found the small of Alara's back, a gesture that had become natural over months of co-parenting. I've been thinking. That's usually dangerous, he smiled, about expanding the family, not immediately, but in a year or two maybe. Give Adrian a sibling. Alara turned to look at him, genuinely surprised. You want another child? I want Adrian to have what we didn't. Family, siblings, connections that go beyond just business or obligation. Roman's pale eyes met hers. And I think we've proven we can do this. Build something good together. Alara thought about it. Another pregnancy? Another child? More chaos and sleepless nights and impossible love. I don't know if I can do IVF again, she said carefully. The hormones, the uncertainty. I wasn't suggesting IVF. Roman's hand moved to cup her face. I was suggesting we try naturally, if you want to. No pressure, if you don't. The implications of that hit Alara all at once, shifting from partners in parenting to something more intimate, crossing lines they'd carefully maintained since the marriage. That would change things, she said quietly. Yes, but things have already changed. We're not the same people we were 2 years ago. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. You're not a prisoner anymore. I'm not just trying to protect an asset. We're partners. Friends even. And I think, if you're willing, we could be more than that. Alara's heart hammered in her chest. She searched his face, looking for manipulation or calculation, found only honesty and something that looked like vulnerability. I need time, she said, to think about what that would mean, what I want.
Take all the time you need. Roman's hand dropped away. I'm not going anywhere. Over the following weeks, Alara watched Roman with new eyes. Noticed the way he made her coffee exactly how she liked it without asking. How he listened when she talked about her design work, offering genuine feedback rather than just placating her. How he was patient with Adrian's tantrums but firm about boundaries. How he'd changed from the cold crime lord who'd first revealed her impossible situation into someone who actually tried to be better. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. And she realized that somewhere in the chaos and compromise and shared purpose, she'd fallen for him. Not dramatically, not with fireworks, but quietly and steadily. Like learning to trust someone who'd earned it through consistent action. One night, 3 months after his initial suggestion, Alara found Roman in his office reviewing foundation reports. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began. He looked up immediately, setting aside his work. And I think..." She moved closer, her heart racing. "I think maybe we should try. Not right away, but soon, when we're both ready." Roman stood, moving around the desk to stand in front of her. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm sure I want to find out where this goes. We've built something good for Adrian. Maybe we can build something good for us too." He kissed her then. Not the brief formality from their wedding, but something real, testing, asking permission even as he granted it. Alara kissed him back, letting herself fall into this impossible man who'd somehow become her partner, her friend, and now potentially something more. When they finally broke apart, Roman rested his forehead against hers. "Isabel would approve," he said softly. "She always said I needed someone who'd challenge me, who wouldn't just accept what I told them to accept." "She sounds like she was smart." "She was, and I think..." He paused. "I think she'd be happy that you and I found each other, even if the circumstances were insane." "Especially because the circumstances were insane," Alara corrected. "Nothing about our family is normal. Why should our relationship be?" Roman laughed, and the sound was lighter than anything Alara had heard from him before. They stood like that for a long moment, forehead to forehead, breathing each other in, building something new on the foundation of everything they'd survived. Outside, night settled over the forest. In his nursery, Adrian slept peacefully, protected by parents who'd chosen each other through impossible circumstances and decided to keep choosing each other every day after. The threats would never fully disappear. Roman's world would always have dangers, but they'd face them together now, not just for survival, but because they'd built something worth protecting. A family created from loss and chaos and accidental love. A son who would grow up knowing he was wanted. Knowing that sometimes the best things came from the worst beginnings. Knowing that family wasn't just blood, but choice and commitment, and the willingness to stay when leaving would be easier. And two people who'd started as captor and captive, who'd become partners, and who were slowly, carefully becoming something neither of them had words for yet. But love, Alara thought, would probably cover it eventually. For now, though, partnership was enough. Partnership. And the promise of more tomorrows together than either of them had expected to have. The story that began with Alara waking in a stranger's mansion, pregnant and trapped, had transformed into something she never could have anticipated. She'd found the sister she never knew she had, even if only in stories and photographs. She'd become a mother to a child who carried that sister's legacy forward. And she'd found a partner in the last person she should have trusted. Life was messy and complicated and morally gray. But it was also beautiful in its own imperfect way. And as Roman's arms wrapped around her in his study, with their son sleeping peacefully down the hall and years of possibilities stretching ahead, Alara decided that imperfect was more than good enough. It was real. And real, she'd learned, was better than any fantasy she could have imagined.